Who Comes with Cannons, Chapter 4, Bad Neighbors. At school the next day, Truth heard news to take home to her aunt and uncle. Tow-headed Perry Gibson, who was the same age as she, was the center of attention at recess when he started to tell about the visit Daniel Fields and his slade coffle had made the night before. Perry liked to talk. He even got up on a stump to do it. As children clustered around him, he said loudly, "I got something to tell you. My pa was sure put out when he heard it. A prime slave got away from Mr. Fields' coffle. That black man they caught up north got loose from his chains and ran like the wind. They went looking for him, but he disappeared. Just like that." He snapped his fingers. "That's what Mr. Fields said." Truth stayed at the back of the little crowd. Lydia came to join her with Martha at her side. "How could he disappear?" asked a boy. "Mr. Fields don't know, but he said somebody from around here probably hit him. Why, he even knows who done it. He said that slave was worth $400. "Who did it?" asked a girl Truth had outrun. Perry looked triumphantly at Truth, Lydia, and Martha. Them three over there, them Quakers. Mr. Fields says that's what Quakers do. That's what Pa and my big brother say, too. Quakers hide black slaves we folks own and ship 'em north. The slaves don't belong to them. Taking them ain't no different from horse or cow stealing. Them Quakers done it." "Stand thy ground," whispered Martha to Lydia and Truth. Suddenly she stepped forward and called out, "Slavery's wicked. No man ought to own another man." The boy laughed. "Pa says the law says different. So does the Bible. It talks about slavery." He jumped down and walked over to the three girls, followed by a number of boys his age and younger. Standing before the girls, he made a fist and shook it. "If you was boys, I'd fight you good, but you ain't. That don't mean my big brothers can't fight your menfolk." Her eyes on Perry's fist, Truth said quietly, though her head pounded, "Quaker men don't ever fight. Not for any side or any war." Perry crowed, "If you Quakers won't fight for the South when the war comes, your men'll get beat up." "Or burned out," shouted another boy. Lydia's frightened cry rose over the clear cheering that followed. "Mr. Hartling, Mr. Hartling, please come out." Perry Gibson lowered his voice. Breathing defiance, he whispered, "I wish you three was boys. Just you Quakers wait. Wait till war comes, and you'll get what you've been asking for all along. Us good, true Southerners will come calling on you. Pa vows it." Martha had the last word before the clot of boys dissolved at Mr. Hartling's appearance in the schoolhouse door. "I bet he vowed it over a barrel of whiskey last night with that slave hunter," she threw at him. Truth saw how Perry's eyes gleamed like an angry animal's. They scared her. So did Martha's bravery. When their tormentors had gone, Truth asked the tall girl in a whisper Lydia wouldn't overhear, "Did Squire get away?" Martha's nod was grim. "He's at Station 8 by now." "Don't ask me where it is. I will not tell thee." "I would not ask, Martha. Will the Gibsons come to hurt my cousins?" "Oh, yes. Not thy aunt and uncle, because they are too old, but Todd and Robert, yes. Some men in Goldsboro once said they'd like to coat them with tar and cover them with feathers. Men die from that." Truth nodded. She'd heard of men who had died in Indiana from that cruelty. Good Quakers and abolitionists who weren't Quakers. She asked, "Should I tell my aunt what happened just now, Martha?" "Thee need not. Tell her what I told thee of Squire. She knows all she needs to do of thy bad neighbors." Martha's eyes were dark and fiery. She asked, "Does thee know the Bible verse, 'Thou shalt not deliver unto his master the servant which is escaped from his master unto thee'?" "No, I never heard it." "Thee should know it, Truth. It's in chapter 23 of Deuteronomy. If the times come, say to slave catchers, we cannot fight with our fists and weapons, but we can fight with words." "I'll remember it. Tell it to me again." That afternoon, Truth kept repeating the verse under her breath, memorizing it, thinking about it. She didn't hear her teacher call on her until he called her name twice. He asked, "Wool gathering, Truth?" "Yes, sir." "I heard you mumbling. Perhaps you'd like to stand up and tell the rest of us what you find so interesting." Her face, hot with blushes, Truth rose. She said, "It's a Bible verse I just heard. It says—" When she finished, Michael Hartling nodded. "Yes, but keep your mind on decimals. You may sit down." Truth was aware of her teacher's level look at her as she was speaking. It made her feel he approved of her words. Yet she was also aware of Perry Gibson's snickering. March passed with more and more talk of a war brewing. The Bardwell men returned long-faced from their trips to Goldsboro. Truth noticed how her aunt watched for them to come back each time from the front porch. Once, Todd came home with a black eye and a bruised face, and would only say that he had met a Gibson in town. Twice on rainy meeting days, clods of wet earth were hurled at the meeting house, thudding against the walls. No Quaker went out to see who threw them. Truth loved springtime. Though the Bardwells kept just a few cows and no sheep, catching sight of the baby calves delighted her. One morning in mid-April, she stopped on her way to school to watch them in the field they shared with their mothers. The baby's clumsiness enchanted her. One little black and white bull calf was getting to know her and would come to the fence to have his muzzle scratched when he was not suckling. She had named him Blackberry, after a calf she and her father had had back home. Each time she saw him, she thought of Indiana. Why hadn't Pa written? Was he too sick? She'd written to him twice. Letters took so very long to get from North Carolina to California. Weeks and weeks. Perhaps one was on its way. While she stood outside the rail fence near the great pile of gray boulders that marked the northern edge of the pasture, she heard the quick thud of hooves. Truth looked up. A rider galloped toward her on a bay horse was her enemy, Perry Gibson, who rushed past, almost knocking her down. He reined in, shouting, "The South fired on Fort Sumter in South Carolina with the Yankees inside it. Pa just found out. That ain't so far from here. The war's startin'. Tell old man Hartling I won't be at school today. I'm on my way to Goldsboro." Perry threw back his head and cheered, and then set his heels to the bay and shot past her. Once she was out of sight, Truth squared her shoulders and headed for the house. Yes, she'd have to pass on the news about Fort Sumter. The Bardwells had expected something like this to happen. Uncle Matthew said it would be the first step toward war. "Why has thee come back, Truth?" her aunt asked her when she came into the kitchen. "There's news." After Truth told what she had heard, the woman sighed, wiped soapy water off her hands, and said, "I will tell the men. Get thee to school. This is not a holiday." "There'll be a war now, won't there?" "Oh, yes, child." Aunt Elizabeth gave her a little smile. "Do not expect to hear the war much spoken of in this house. We shall try to take no part in it. Go tell the teacher and the friends, as thee knows at school, what the boy told thee. Do not be angry at him." Truth cried, "He's hateful! That's so hard, Aunt Elizabeth." As the woman took her shawl from a nail and flung it over her head, she said, "The way of a friend can be hard. Not all who call themselves friends will remain strong in this war. But we will, won't we?" "Yes, dear. Yes, we shall, dear." Little was said about the news at supper that April night, except at the end of the blessing before they started to eat, and then Matthew Bardwell added, "Thou shalt not kill. That is what we live by." While she ate, Truth thought of what had happened at school that day. She had not been the first with Perry's news. Someone had brought it earlier. Most of the children whose parents wanted a war ran about happily, shouting and wrestling and leaping on one another. Finally, Mr. Hartling dismissed the school and sent the children home. Truth and the other friends stayed behind, somberly at their desks. "What will thee do, Mr. Hartling? Will thee go to be a soldier for the South?" His face was troubled as he replied, "I don't know yet, Martha." Lydia said, "Thee is a Methodist. My mother says Methodists go to war." Michael Hartling frowned. "We may dance and have parties, but not all Methodists go to war." Lydia spoke again. "Papa says soldiers from this state can come take thee to be a soldier too. South Carolina left the Union just before Christmas. Papa says this state will secede shortly." "That's true." He smiled a little. "But it will take time to do that. War has not even been declared yet." "Will thee stay here till then?" asked Truth, who, to her surprise, found that the thought of his going to war was as dreadful as if he'd been a friend. "Yes, Truth, as long as I can. I do not want to leave here." He gave her a wide smile. Truth grinned back, warmed by his reply. Martha said, "We hope all will go well with thee." "Thank you." "Well, you'd best go home too. Be careful. You Quakers won't be well liked in the South right now." "We know that," agreed Lydia. That night, the Bardwells experienced their first taste of trouble. A whooping band of horsemen came galloping down their road from their evening of celebrating in Goldsboro. As they went by, a shower of rocks clattered against the front of the house. The noise awakened Truth. She went out onto the landing and saw her cousin Robert in his long nightshirt. He was leaning out the hall window where the glass had shattered. She heard him tell his brother, who had joined him, "It's the Gibsons going home. They've been drinking in some Goldsboro tavern. We'll either have to have the glazier to repair the glass in the window or board it over." "Board it over is best," said Todd. "They'll be back."